Two women stand in front of a laptop projecting a slideshow presentation.
So I'm Elizabeth, and this is Cristin, and we work at the Seattle office for Facebook. I'm a content strategy manager, and Cristin is a UX researcher. Oh, there's our pictures. So I want to start by saying that we are not accessibility experts. We are going to talk today about a project that we did for our product, which is Facebook Marketplace. How many people know Facebook Marketplace? Oh, wow, that is so exciting. So if you don't know it, it is where individuals can buy and sell from each other on Facebook. So we have things like buy and sell groups, but we also have our open marketplace where people can post things for sale, list things, and then also buy things within your local community or things that you want. So Cristin and I, as I said, are not accessibility experts, but we care deeply about making our product more accessible and inclusive. So we, and Kristin's going to talk a little bit about how we got here, but about a year and a half ago, we said that we need to do a lot more work here. We rose our hands and said this is something we care about. Actually, Cristin might talk about this. She was inspired by hearing Kat speak about a year ago. So it comes full circle, right? So we're going to explain the process that we took. I'm actually going to start with a video, and this is a video of a mom who is also blind, and she is talking about how she uses Facebook to connect with a bigger community of blind moms, but also of parents, and just getting general parenting information.
When I hear Jean's voice every morning, it never ceases to make me smile. She is growing up in a world that gives her messages that blindness is not a good thing or blind people are limited in some way. I thought to myself, this is such a big undertaking, bringing this child into the world, and technology has solved so many of my problems. The first thing I did was go to technology. I went to Facebook, and I had at that time a blind friend who was a mother, and I just started talking to her about strategies for adaptive parenting. I met other blind moms literally from all around the world, but that still didn't make me feel like I had a group close to me that would be able to support and nurture and hold my family as we went through this process. What'd the gingerbread man say?
You can't catch me.
I'm the
Gingerbread man.
I'm the gingerbread man. No one can raise a child alone. So I created a group on Facebook called Jean's Village. My daughter's name is Jean, and I added people to that group who I wanted to invite into our village. I started posting things about my pregnancy. It also developed into a group that I think helped me break down stigma about blindness and about blind people and about disability and the perception of limitations. I ride BART every day. It's the time when I update Facebook. I have a lot of different technologies, a braille display that connects to my smartphone, a smartphone that has a screen reader built into it.
Audience. Location. Album. Text field is editing.
It's remarkable that this powerful platform is available to almost anyone in the world for free. Every day I use Facebook to break down stigma. It's an equalizer because I'm not such an anomaly. I'm just a blind mom.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some numbers first, because this informs some of the work that we do at Facebook. So the first one is a survey that we did with users, Facebook users in 50 countries. And what we learned from these users is that 30% of the people surveyed reported difficulty in at least one of these areas. And that includes seeing, hearing, speaking, organizing thoughts, walking, or grasping with their hands. 30% is a huge number. And when you think at the scale that Facebook operates, more than 2 billion users, that is a humongous number. So when we think about the work we do, we have a huge responsibility to obviously all of these people along with everyone else. The next number that we're going to talk about is specifically for vision impairment, and that's what we're actually going to be talking about, is use of screen readers for Facebook Marketplace. So also on Facebook, we know that 1 in 10 people use Zoom on the desktop browser. So again, a large number. We also know that 20% of people increase their font size on iOS when using Facebook. So I just wanted to give some of those numbers so you can understand the scale of the things that we're working with. So I'm going to actually turn this over to Cristin, who's going to talk a little bit about the work that we have done on Marketplace specifically.
Thanks. So a lot of you have already used Marketplace, so you're already familiar. You can clean out your closet and sell your stuff. You can go on there and find, a hot item like that lamp you've been looking for. You can rent an apartment, right? We're bringing people together within their communities to buy and sell things. The other cool thing is there are a lot of people who are actually making a living off of Marketplace. So we really empower people to support their families and to support their livelihood, which is really awesome. But working in a marketplace like this, where we're bringing like two sides together, poses some challenges. And those challenges apply to everyone in this room. So first of all the inventory is unique, right? Once this pillow is gone, it's gone. But you might be searching for a pillow, right? So you have 20 different pillows to choose from now. Well, they all have a different amount of information available to them, right? There's no standardization for what is the size of the pillow, what's the color of the pillow, where's that pillow located, right? Is it near me or is it all the way across Seattle? So there's no standardization, which can make it kind of complicated for people to really find what they're looking for. And also, when you actually are inquiring about this pillow and you want to talk to somebody, you might be talking to somebody that you've actually never personally met before, right? And what does that mean for building trust with that person and knowing that you're safe communicating with them? And then when you actually want to pick up the item and pay for it, often this requires traveling, right? Traveling to a location like a grocery store or a Starbucks to exchange that money and that item. So a lot of challenges introduced within the marketplace that we work within. So how our accessibility journey started is actually started with a post from an engineer. So I just want to point out that anybody can kick off an accessibility project within your company. It started with a post from an engineer, and she was like, hey, what do we do about accessibility? What are our accessibility standards? And a bunch of us were like, oh yeah, that interests us too. Let's get together and kind of figure out what we can do. And so we actually got in a conference room, and the very first thing we did was pull out our iPhones and turn on the screen reader. How many of you have turned on the screen reader on your phone? All right, there's a lot of opportunity in this room to check that out. It's something that you can, at lunchtime today, you can turn it on and you can experience it. And I will tell you, it was completely eye-opening for us. Most of us in the room had never done that before, and it was like, oh my goodness, like this is what that experience is like. Right? And we had the benefit of being sighted, so we could understand how flicking to one location isn't exactly what we intended to do, right? But imagine that that's your only source of information, is what the screen reader is reading to you. It becomes a lot more limited. But obviously we're working in a vacuum, right? We were all sighted in that room, and so we knew that we needed to understand the experience from people who use screen readers every day. So we're like, how do we do that? We run a usability session, right? So I'm a UX researcher, of course. I raise my hand and I'm like, let's get some people in the office and let's actually watch them use it. And so this is actually a screenshot of what it looks like. I am in the lab sitting next to our participant, and my team gets to observe this from the next room, right? So we're actually experiencing this person's situation real time. So a couple things that just right away that were super eye-opening to us. Thinking about accessibility throughout the entire experience. This wasn't just a normal usability test, right? We had to consider how were the participants going to travel to Facebook, right? Did they have a reliable mode of communication? We needed to just make sure that they felt safe and that they felt confident that they could bring any sort of assistance that they needed, that they could request accommodation. And that's honestly, it's just something I don't normally think about in an everyday usability study. So it was definitely a learning experience for me. We also learned really simple things. She's there and she's holding her phone and she's holding it like this. Right? I'm used to watching people use their iPhones like this with their thumbs moving really quickly. And she's got her phone up here next to her ear, right? So that's already orientation about navigating through the page that we were learning about. Usability testing is just, obviously, I'm going to tell you, it's like the coolest thing in the world. The empathy that this builds for a team is just remarkable. And I know empathy is like a word that we throw around a ton, but there is nothing like watching people use our product on a screen reader to just completely open our eyes to what that experience was really like. So what did we learn? We kind of took away these like 3 big themes from our sessions. Number 1, that the information architecture was not optimized for screen readers. So folks came to the session, they had something in their mind that they wanted to shop for, right? The woman on the previous screen was looking for an Instapot. She comes into Marketplace and immediately is trying to get oriented, right? She's like, what is there to do here? How do I find the item that I need? And it was just obvious right away that we weren't giving her that information first, right? Immediately you can start to listen to what the screen reader is reading out to you, and we're like, oh my goodness, we're throwing all this stuff in there before she even knows what Marketplace is. So really thinking about the information hierarchy and the order of operations of how you're disclosing information as you scroll down the page. The number 2 thing is the lack of structured data. It made it difficult for someone using a screen reader. So again, this is going to be difficult for all of us. Like I said, you're looking for a pillow. All those pillows are going to have different levels of information. But what really popped out for us here was actually the alt text on the photos. So we're very visual, especially at Facebook, we're a very visual platform, right? We rely a lot on those photos. And if there's no alt text or that alt text is poor, then you actually don't get a sense for what that product actually is, or what it actually looks like, or what color it is, or what, in what context is that photo being shown? Is it out in a backyard, or is it in a living room? Things that would give us context as far as if we wanted to purchase that item. And then the third thing was that there was mislabeled or missing labels that led to user confusion. So the screen reader was actually like what it was reading wasn't always what was written on the page, right? That was a big eye-opener for us. So I'll give you a really concrete example. We had this call to action on the page. It was a big blue button. It was like super obvious to us that that was the one thing that we wanted you to do on the page. But when a screen reader like landed on that call to action, it said button. That's what it said. And we're like, oh my gosh, like you don't even know what the most important thing on the page is because the screen reader is saying button, right? So like you've just completely lost the opportunity to like engage further and learn more about that product.
Here we have the various screen readers that we've used. So those of you who uses iOS or an iPhone here, okay. Wow, so many people. That's interesting because usually it's more Android. But so VoiceOver is the technology that is used on an iOS. And it's a very simple, straightforward, sounded like a lot of you had used screen readers. It's within your settings. And it's under General, Accessibility. You simply turn it on or off. If anybody wants some help doing that at lunch, I'm happy to go through that with you. Sounds like there's a lot of others that could do that. On Android, that same technology is called Talkback. They're very, very similar. There are some slight differences, but fairly similar. And then on a desktop, the technology on Windows and web on a PC is called JAWS. We actually did most of our work on mobile, so using both the VoiceOver and Talkback technologies. We have a smaller percentage of our users on desktop, so for us, we wanted to focus where we could have the biggest impact right away, which is why we started with mobile. It is something that we are hoping to do more of is the desktop work. What we actually did to address some of the issues that Cristin brought out in research. So as Cristin said, this was initiated by an engineer on our team, but a lot of us across many disciplines were very interested in fixing it. Like I said, we're not accessibility experts. We just really, really cared about making a difference. So we had content strategists like myself, researchers, we had designers that wanted to participate, and we all got together and talked about how we could improve this. So once we knew what our problems were, we decided to tackle them through, we started with an audit. And actually, I was just telling Kat or Molly, I can't remember, we had an amazing intern. And it just goes to show you that she was just one of the best interns I've ever had. And she cared so much about this. She actually decided to take this on as her intern project and led up the accessibility audit on Marketplace. Spent an entire summer deep diving. I don't know how many hours she spent doing this. She came from Northwestern, just amazing woman, and decided to lead this effort. So really anybody can get involved in this work. So from a content strategist perspective, we decided to tackle first the third issue that Cristin mentioned, which is that labels were either mislabeled or missing. We felt like as a high priority to make Marketplace more accessible, we needed to actually have the screen reader work. We were being inaccessible to many people because the screen reader literally wasn't working. So what our team did during that audit is looked at 3 different areas, and these are key areas for a screen reader. There are labels, there are traits, and there are hints. So labels are short words, and I'm going to actually show you on the next screen how this looks on a screen reader. Labels are short words or phrases that succinctly describe a control or image that otherwise would not have words. So for example, that might be search. It may be search Marketplace. That gives a little more context, and if you use the screen reader, you can try that out on Marketplace. So the usual format for a label is an action. So for example, save, or search, or click, or something else. Sometimes we do add an object if we want to add context, which is why that one says search Marketplace. The second really important one is a trait. These are often system generated, but we didn't trust that the system would always generate them correctly, so we included these in our audit. So a trait is it describes the element that a user has selected. This might be something like button, as Cristin mentioned. It could be image, it could be header. It's describing the actual element that you are on the screen. And then last are hints. Hints are optional, but they give a brief description of what an element's action does, and they describe the results of taking action on that element. So hints are needed when the label and trait do not give enough context to a user to understand what's going to happen once they select something. So for example, a hint might be double tap to edit. You're giving the person context to know that they will actually be editing if they take the action of double tap. So these are really, really important things to know as a content strategist, but also anyone working on a product. You need to do this right. When we did our audit, we found a lot of bugs related to these. We then worked with our engineering team to prioritize. We prioritized ones that we felt were absolute blockers that someone could not use the product if they weren't fixed. We fixed those immediately and then worked our way through the entire list. And we have a fantastic engineering team that felt really dedicated to fixing these issues. So I'm actually going to show you what these look like.
Camera button. Double tap to activate. Search Marketplace edit box. Double tap to enter text. Messaging button. Double tap to activate. Current location for filtering. Tap to change button.
So that's an example of if you're using a screen reader, what you will hear. And you can set different speeds, you can set different tones. There's some options within the native screen readers to do that. But that was a typical screen reader use of a screen. So I want to end this by talking a little bit about what we learned and how what we see as best practices if you're working on products. So we know that we didn't fix everything on Marketplace. We continue to work on this. One of our biggest challenges at Facebook is that we work at an incredible speed of change and that we are always changing and improving our products. We also work at, as I said earlier, at a very big scale. So that makes it difficult, makes it challenging for people to, for all of us to continue to make sure that our products are as good as they can be. But what we learned that we hope to include in our product development processes, accessibility efforts have to be baked into design, content strategy, and engineering from the start. So as content strategists, we learn what those hints and traits and labels are. We know that we always need to work with engineers when we're creating content to make sure that they are simple, that they are straightforward, that they are accurate. You don't want to have labels that are too complicated. As you can imagine, that would really complicate your experience if you're hearing too much content. So it's the balance between giving enough context and providing a utility. So secondly, we learned that research needs to consider inclusivity for all of our sessions. So not just special sessions like Cristin talked about where we're using screen reader users, but actually all of our usability sessions, that we should be including screen readers. In this case, we were looking at the vision spectrum, but we should be using people with different abilities in all of our various research sessions. The third was that everyone on a product team should be using screen readers to test all the time. So we do, as you can imagine, lots and lots of testing of everything before we ship products. A big part of that should be actually using a screen reader to test that. We have included that in some of our quality processes at Facebook, which is has made a big difference because we're able to spot problems very early before we actually get products out to the market. And then finally, and this is something that those of you who work in companies where you're shipping products know, that if something is not tied to a measurable outcome, if there is not something that you can say you made a difference, then it often you'll be challenged to move it forward. So we actually tied a lot of our accessibility efforts to our quality programs that we already have in place, made sure that, and that kind of tying back to earlier what I said, it has to be baked in from the beginning, make sure that accessibility was part of those quality programs so that we could then report on them and actually show that we were moving the needle in improvements. So that is all for now. I guess I want to end this, and we're going to talk a little bit in one of the next activities. Am I doing okay with the time? You're good. Okay, good. With questions, so, and also just things to think about as you develop products. How many people are on product teams or work in, so a lot of people. Good, all right. So the questions I have for you to kind of take back to your teams and think about are, how can you include accessibility practices from the beginning of design, content strategy, and research? How can you really bake it into your processes? Make sure it's systematized, so it's not just people like us who care a lot, because we may not be always the people working on it. Make sure that it's systematized throughout everything that you do. Also, are there existing processes that you can leverage? So I mentioned that we have our quality processes. We already had those. People were using them all the time. They were using that to make sure products were good. We jumped into that and said, let's add accessibility to that. So are there existing processes that you can already use, that people understand, they're familiar with, and that have some sort of measurable outcome? So I challenge all of you to take this back to the work that you do, in particular for us with screen readers. We felt that we started with screen readers, but there's a lot of other places, as Kat mentioned, as others mentioned, that we could improve our accessibility on Marketplace. So I encourage you all to take that back to your product teams and ask these questions. And really, you don't have to be experts. We are definitely not experts, but you just have to care. So thank you.